time for Hostel Discourse, episode 15. Now your host, David Rolfing.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Hostel Discourse. We have a great show planned for you today. The British Open was last weekend, so we will be discussing the winner and all the happenings of that great tournament, as well as debating what is the greatest sporting rivalry of all time. Before we get into it, let me introduce you to the crew for today's podcast. With me, as always, is Jacob Hunter in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Hello.
Hello, Jacob. And then from Oklahoma City, Joe Kuiper.
How you doing?
And all the way from Fayetteville, Arkansas, he'll be back in Tulsa soon enough, Jared Cozart.
Hey,
but not too
gang.
soon.
And all the way from New York City, New York, for the first time, but returning guest on Hostel Discourse, Christopher Fisher.
Thank you for having me back.
Welcome back, Chris. We miss you here in Tulsa.
Know.
We're very lonely.
I miss you too. I have no friends.
You never did.
Well,
except for the dudes on the pickup court.
They're not my friends, Jared. I'm not cool enough.
Chris, I know you've spoken about your British Open tradition of waking up at 4:30 in the morning and watching the tournament. Did you continue that tradition this time around?
Yes, let me tell you, there is no better time to completely throw off your sleep schedule than the last week before you start a job again. So I was sleeping on the couch most nights and waking up anywhere from 1:30 to 4:30 and watching a lot of golf, and I have been pretty tired since.
A true fan you are.
Thank you.
So Jordan Spieth was the champion this year, the youngest American to win at 23 years of age, turns 24 in 2 days, July 27th. Apparently a British golfer hasn't won since 1992 when Nick Faldo won. American winning is a fairly common occurrence. What do you think of Jordan Spieth's overall play? I know he kind of came back at the end for a clutch win, but what do you think of his play this win?
I thought his overall play was very impressive through Saturday. So the first 3 days of the tournament, he was the only player in the entire field to shoot under par in every round. And if you watched, especially Friday, that's quite the feat because the British Open is notorious for being, unlike any other tournament, especially in America, completely exposed to the weather elements. And on Friday, the course just got beat up. There was 25-mile-per-hour wind all day, pretty strong driving rain for most of the day, and the course is just wide open. Links golf in British Open typically has very little trees. It's just rugged coast, usually somewhere in England or Scotland or Ireland. And I think the average score for the field of the best golfers in the world was somewhere around 5 over par on Friday. So for Jordan to shoot 1 under on that day is like shooting 6 under at a tournament where even par is playing as actual par. So, and
which
then we can get into,
even then that would be high for especially like a major tournament.
Right. Yeah. So, and then Sunday was a whole different thing that we can get into for a second.
I've got to ask, Chris, you played at St. Andrews, which was the location of the British Open 2 years ago. What did you shoot on that course in comparison?
So I shot an 89 on that day, which I'm not a great golfer by any stretch. I'm generally shoot somewhere between, 12 to 18 or 20 over par is a typical range for me, and I can do worse than that pretty easily. And St. Andrews is a par 72. Yeah. So that was a good day for me on a course that is the most historic in the world. And it was just the coolest experience I've ever had. And I've never played in anything like that. It was, about 30 miles an hour of wind. And my caddy said that it was kind of just an average wind day for them. So it's a whole nother animal.
Yeah, the wind factor on British courses must be ridiculous. Because when I lived there, it was extremely windy every day, and especially right on the coast of Scotland. That has to play a big factor on those courses.
Yeah, it's and Jacob can speak to this as much as anyone, but the kind of traditional American style golf, especially for these pros, is metaphorically what they'll call throwing darts, where basically you hit a long, straight, good drive, and you can have a short iron or a wedge in, and basically just aim right at the flag, and hopefully knock it close and then make a putt. In link style golf, especially the courses that are set up for the British Open, you're exposed to all this weather. You can't really play that way because high ball flights are extra susceptible to wind. So you'll see players kind of using their imagination, and there's 4 or 5 different shots they can play on pretty much every swing they take. It's a really cool style of golf. It's the original style of golf. And I saw a cool stat that kind of speaks to probably both the mental and experience side of link style golf. And this was before Jordan won, but I think the average age of the last 4 or 5 major championship winners was somewhere around 24, 25 for the other 3 majors. And for the British Open, it was 38. So it shows you how, experience and not necessarily being the most athletic or the longest hitting golfer is what's important at the British Open.
Well, we all know athleticism doesn't matter in golf.
Not that important, yeah. Yeah, I read that article on 538. It's by Neil Payne, if I want to do a works cited. But that was really on my mind the whole time, or really all weekend. I did not know that the age disparity was so great. And I did a little more research just for the past 6 or 7 years, and even the top 5 is still super old. I thought it might have been, I was wondering if it was coincidental that maybe it was still a young top 10 or top 5 each year. But yeah, that article goes into more detail about, or at least just explains the phenomenon of the British Open just being dominated by older players. Chris will have to flesh this out a little bit, but I was trying to thinking about how young Jordan is compared to past winners. It made me wonder what he specifically was doing that was going so well for him. I'll admit that I did not watch hardly any of this tournament. I caught as many highlight reels and listened to as many podcasts as I could that were going on during the weekend. But if you just go on the Open's website and look at their statistics they were keeping, you would probably be surprised that Jordan had won, because he's only in the top 5 in 2 categories. He was second in total birdies behind Matt Kuchar, who he beat by 2 strokes. And then he was the number 1 in the field in eagles with 3 for the tournament. This is a list of statistics that Jordan was not even in the top 5 in. Longest drives, which is not really a surprise. Fairways hit. Greens in regulation. Fewest putts. Scrambles. Average putts per round. 1 putts. 3 putts. No putts. Sand saves. Most greens in regulation in 1 round, and greens under regulation. Jordan was not in the top 5 in any of those statistics.
See, to me, I'm getting more and more into golf because it's so much more interesting than I ever gave it credit for, which I'm sure is music to Jacob's ears especially, and Chris's.
That's fun to hear, yeah.
Yeah. But what's interesting to me that I'm learning about golf is that to win tournaments, Cooch is a very good golfer. He played great all weekend. And, but he's such a safe player, he lays up when he can. He'll get par every time. He had a lot of birdies this time, but he's a really safe player. And it just turns out that's not the recipe for winning golf tournaments. You take Martin Keimer, for example, and Matt Kuchar is a better golfer than Martin Keimer, but Martin Keimer is a 2-time major champion, and Matt Kuchar has 0, right? Am I right about that?
Correct.
Yeah.
Right, so playing it safe is a recipe to get second place maybe, but being adventurous and playing a little more risky is how you win tournaments. And so you don't have to be super accurate. Jordan doesn't have to hit all the fairways to win the tournament. So that's something that stood out to me that I find really fascinating about golf, and how it kind of flies in the face of conventional wisdom a little bit.
So Brandon Grace shot the lowest round ever in major history with a 62. Which is crazy. Do you know what place he ended up in? 2nd or 3rd?
No.
Yeah, that's insane. He had the lowest single round, but overall, a few guys beat him.
And if you want to put an asterisk by that, this course was a par 70. No one has ever shot a 62. People have shot 8 under. People have shot 9 under. No, have they? Yeah, people have shot 9 under in majors.
Phil shot 63 at par 71 Troon last year when he lipped out for 62 on the 18th.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
So, yeah, on that point, what a horrible person to have be the first to shoot 62. Tiger Woods has lipped out on 18. Phil Mickelson last year, when he's in his mid-40s, lips out on 18. And it's Brandon Grace, just kind of a... I mean, if you're a golf fan, you know who he is, but he's a nobody from South Africa who's a good golfer, but what a yawn. Ugh.
Yeah. And then Lee Hao Tong shot 63 the next day.
Yeah.
24 hours earlier, he would have tied the record.
I get confused. Can someone please fill me in with Chinese people? I've seen their names switched back and forth, and I know you're supposed to say the last name first, but I get confused at which is the last name. And so I've seen Hao Tong Lee and Lee Hao Tong. I'm really confused. Does anyone know Chinese name pronunciation?
I worked at a firm this summer that...
Oh, yeah, you're the perfect person.
That specializes in the Chinese economy. And I don't know.
Damn.
I know this. I know that the president of China, his name is Xi Jinping. I'm sure my pronunciation's off, but XI, it's written, Xi Jinping, but he's called President Xi. So I don't know. Sorry.
How's that Chinese economy doing though?
Oh, it's booming. It's booming. You better buy now, Joe. You better buy now, my guy.
Buy the Chinese economy, Joe.
I will buy it. I have money for that.
Give us a little cliff notes. You don't have to describe every single shot, but what happened? How did Jordan win?
So, okay, I think the biggest thing that made Sunday so entertaining, you just don't always get a very entertaining Sunday final round in major championships. Sometimes someone runs away with the lead.
Which is also crazy because this is 2 years in a row these past 2 years have been the most exciting British Opens in my living memory, I think.
Yeah, same for me too. They've been incredible. But I think the biggest thing was we all remember Jordan Spieth's one of the most epic meltdowns in all of sports at Augusta 2 years ago when he had a 5-stroke lead at the turn and quadruple bogeyed 12 and went on to lose that lead. And he's won tournaments since, but he hasn't won a major since. He has not really even, I guess he contended in the Masters this year. But long story short, he held a 3-stroke lead going into Sunday at the British Open. And I think he bogeyed 3 of the first 4 holes. And everyone just started wondering, is he going to collapse again? And then he was kind of fighting back and had a 1 or 2 stroke lead. And on hole number 13, he hit the worst drive I've ever seen a professional golfer hit. And there was a tall hill about 100 yards to the right of the fairway, and he hit it on the other side of the hill. It was worse than what Joe does sometimes.
Hey, whoa, easy.
If you haven't seen it, you owe it to yourself to watch video of that drive, because right after it happens, Jordan kind of puts his hands on his head, like, oh my God, what have I done? It's the most authentic. I don't know. Of course, Jordan Spieth wears every emotion on his sleeve, but he kept it composed when he put 2 balls in the water at number 12 at Augusta, but he looked like he saw death when he hit that drive.
Also, funny on that note, he asked his caddy something like, I'm paraphrasing, but it was something like, are we having a meltdown? And that was a question he asked his caddy. I love how I love how is candid the right word he is. Anyway,
yeah.
I bet his caddy was like, who is this we?
So that wasn't the end of the story, obviously. Jordan took about 30 minutes to play his next shot. It felt like he just lost the tournament. It looked like he was going to. He ended up making a very impressive up and down after taking a penalty stroke to make bogey. And then when it looked like Jordan Spieth had just collapsed again, he had what a lot of people are calling the most impressive finishing 5 holes in a tournament ever. He went the next hole, he almost made a hole-in-one. He was about 2 inches away from a hole-in-one. And he went birdie, eagle on the next, birdie, par to play the last 5 holes in 5 under and win by 2. It was some of the most impressive golf I've watched. and just the guts to have not just the baggage of losing the 3-stroke lead in that round, but, having the demons of remembering what happened at Augusta 2 years ago, and people questioning more than your golf talent, your golf resolve. It was awesome. It was super fun for golf fans and casual fans too.
Yeah, it was really the first time, this might not be fair, maybe the first time that we've seen Jordan pull off a Sunday comeback, especially in a major. It's pretty outstanding that he's gone 2 out of 3 major victories wire to wire.
Yeah.
Which makes me wonder how habitual he has to be. Like, is that the only way? Is that just like by and far the most likely way he will win major championships? If so, I think that makes it way less likely that he will win as many as people want to think he will. It's just weird because with such a small sample size, you can start to imagine all sorts of crazy trends and then back them up with whatever data you can find. I don't know. Wire to wire is kind of, I wouldn't have expected that from him again.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Jordan's also fun because he wins in like spectacular fashion. So I don't know, was it the Travelers where he chipped in to win?
Yeah, like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, so I don't know if that counts as a comeback because I don't know what the score was and all at that time. But
that was on the playoff hole, the first playoff hole.
Yeah, okay, so it's a pretty spectacular way to win. So he's a fun player to watch, no doubt.
Yeah. Fun fact, looking forward, he will potentially be the first pro to ever complete the career Grand Slam at the PGA Championship. And coming up in 2.5 weeks is the PGA Championship at Quail Hollow, where Rory McIlroy has won twice before. So that's a little bit of the narrative to be following looking forward.
Very interesting.
Indeed.
Okay, I think it is time for our debate. This week's debate, as I mentioned before, what is the greatest sports rivalry of all time? I will be the judge. The 4 remaining will be debating their own argument. It is a free-for-all this week, not a 2v2. Get excited. So the basic structure, we'll do 30-second intros, give us a brief overview of why your rivalry is the greatest. Then we'll do rebuttals. You can defend whatever rebuttal comes your way. We'll do more explanation of why your rivalry is so awesome, and then we'll do closing remarks, and I will decide a winner. Before we get started, I would like to read some responses we got on social media of some of our listeners' favorite sporting rivalries. On Facebook, Cole Norman, definitely Cap versus Russ. So that would be Colin Kaepernick and Russell Wilson, NFL. It is interesting. All of these responses are in different sports. So it's definitely not, there's not one answer, very subjective, but whoever gives the best argument will win. Some more. Thomas Shore, Duke versus UNC. Jared.
Whoop, whoop. Hey, we got some smart social media followers.
Yeah, you've got some support from our listeners. Tanner McCord, Boston Bruins versus Montreal Canadiens. So that is hockey. Kevin Vandekamp, Yankees Red Sox. Baseball. Michael Hare, he named a ton of different college football teams and said, I can't choose. So there's a football one. And then Tally Harris, Navratilova versus Everett, which were women's tennis players in the 70s and 80s. And then one on Twitter, Big Ten fan here. So, of course, I have to go with U of M and OSU. And that was at Luke Anglendor. Thanks for those responses, all you listeners out there. All right, let's get into it. Let's start with the so-called winner of last show's debate. I don't know if I can even call that a win with that blatant cheating on the trivia.
A win.
Mr. Buttersworth himself.
That was a win. That was a win.
Yeah, Mr. Buttersworth. Let's start with you. And as we said before, we know Duke versus UNC is your answer.
That's right. That's right. Duke versus UNC college basketball matchup. My 30-second intro. A rivalry, the goodness of a rivalry is determined by 3 things. Quality of the teams or players, parity of the teams or players in head-to-head matchups, and history of the rivalry. So, in short, North Carolina and Duke has the highest combination of quality, parity, and history out of all rivalries in all of sport.
And is this across all of their sports or just basketball?
This is college basketball.
Okay.
Yeah, they have great football programs, though.
That's true. Hey, up and coming, though. Up and coming.
Yeah.
Nice intro. Okay, next, let's go with J number 2. Joe, what's your answer?
Ooh, well, I decided to take things a little outside the box on this one. All these guys picked really conventional answers, and I respect that. I respect the boredom of it, and I respect the wrongness of it. But the correct answer in all of this is that the greatest rivalry of all time is, and probably will be for a long time, the rivalry between LeBron James and Michael Jordan. But wait, Joe, those two players have never even played each other. And, technically you're right, they never have. But there is no issue in sports more divisive, and just more of it tears families apart, And this is an argument between LeBron James and Michael Jordan, two basketball players in the NBA. Michael Jordan, he played back from 1985 until 2003. LeBron James played from 2004 until 2017. And despite not overlapping in their years, this is the thing that, people will argue about for generations to come.
Divisive.
All right. A creative answer, Joe. Non-conventional. Let's go with J number 3. Jacob, what's your choice?
I choose the USA and Europe Ryder Cup teams. And I guess this is a very special golf event. Happens every 2 years for those uninitiated. The history of sports is riddled with rivalries, and many of them are great. Some for different reasons. And I agree with a lot of what Jared has said in that a rivalry, so much of what can make it great are its quality, parity, and history. But the Ryder Cup teams go further. They bring a new level of scope, investment, influence, and a competitive spirit unlike any rivalry in the history of sports. It is these aspects are so deeply rooted in the battles between these two teams that I truly believe the rivalry between the USA and European Ryder Cup teams should be crowned the greatest of all time.
How's pretty rehearsed?
I read it. Yes.
You read it?
Huh, interesting.
It's a good website.
Prep is not a bad thing. Okay, Chris, you are last but not least. What is your answer?
Reluctantly, because it's not creative, it's not very much fun, and I personally don't have much care for it one way or another.
Well, that's like how I feel about you. Just kidding.
I went with Ohio State versus Michigan, but I had to because it is the greatest rivalry of all time. It's a textbook answer, and I put out a list very similar to what Jared did. He said quality, parity, history. I listed out history, parity, popularity, star power, and bad blood. So just to add on to that, it's basically the same essence of a UNC Duke rivalry, which Jared talked about. But I believe it's greater in the fact that it has more history. They've been playing each other since the 1800s. And its popularity. We all know that football is America's #1 sport. And just like UNC Duke, these are university sports which have tradition, history, and overall competitive spirit at their roots. Last but not least, bad blood. The teams hate each other. There's been fights for decades. There's been households divided. People have ended marriages. It's very serious rivalry. And let me throw my last point, which I think expands upon UNC Duke, is that rivalry spreads amongst all sports. So football is #1, but basketball is nearly as intense, and so on.
Great. Good choices, everyone. All different sports. So, who would like to pick apart another person's choice first?
I'll start. Joe, I love the creativity, but also I don't like it that much. You've been watching too much ESPN. It's all ESPN talks about, but it's not a tangible matchup. They've never played each other in an NBA game. They've never played one-on-one. And if we're talking greatest rivalries of all time, sure, LeBron and MJ is a fun thing to talk about. And we might talk about it in 5 years, I don't know. But we're talking about teams that have been playing and competing for over 100 years. And you're going to give me the Stephen A. Smith, LeBron A. LeBron versus Michael answer. I'm disgusted.
Well, you're welcome to be disgusted, but what I see in a rivalry is that it needs to be something that divides people. You know, a rivalry is more than just the team that is in question. It's more than just the players. And I think the wider the scope of that rivalry, the better the rivalry is. And there is no bigger scope than LeBron James versus Michael Jordan. And what I see in Ohio State versus Michigan and in Duke versus UNC especially is that these are rivalries that are restricted to a very small population, where you're talking about the Ohio State fans and the Michigan fans. And while they might all be diehards, all they care about is each other, and the rest of the country doesn't really care about them. But the entire country cares about the Michael Jordan and LeBron James argument. And so I think it transcends just being one team or one group. It's not just Chicago Bulls fans, and it's not just Cleveland Cavaliers fans that have opinions on this matter. It's everybody.
Joe, that is an interesting point, but I think really what makes rivalries, as far as animosity goes, interesting is not animosity or hatred among the fans, because any old ESPN reporter can make up a rivalry among teams and fans will get angry at each other or whatever, okay? What makes it really interesting are when the players themselves really don't like who they're playing against. We have to talk in weird terms with MJ and LeBron because they, of course, are not playing against each other. And I guess their rivalry is for greatest player of all time. But where's the animosity between them? LeBron wears number 23 because of Michael Jordan. He has actually nothing but respect for him. He wears his number. So you're trying to make up this animosity that doesn't exist in this rivalry. LeBron and MJ are nothing but respect. He wears his number.
Jared, I think that is a great point, but it's a little too easy for your case. I think Duke is historically just an unlikable team, or I should say a team easily hated. So you might be able to flaunt that aspect of that rivalry, but I wouldn't say it's so deeply rooted, because that team in its history has just been riddled with players that have just the most punchable faces and flop around and are just absolute whatever word you want to put in that sentence. So I think that that detracts from your case a little bit. Everyone hates Duke.
I don't follow. How does that detract?
It's not so deeply rooted, I think, as probably Chris's argument. At least the animosity.
Are you saying that North Carolina players don't hate Duke players and vice versa?
I'm saying they do, but so does everybody else.
Okay, I think that does nothing to the state of my rivalry.
Okay, well, I think that with the USA and Ryder Cup teams, they can claim a particular animosity towards each other, but the one that UNC has is the same one that everyone in the country shares for that team.
Oh.
And if anything, it's just it's just by circumstance, they have a pretty crazy matchup and history of being very equally matched teams, but they don't hate each other. At least UNC doesn't hate Duke more than anyone else does in the country.
Okay. I see what you're saying, and I regret to tell you because we're friends, and trust me, I like you, man. I really do. But you're wrong.
Jared.
Yeah.
How about you defend yourself and give us a little background on the rivalry and some history so that we can learn more about it?
I'm so happy to do that. I'll start with general, kind of a more detailed of my opening statement, I guess, and then I'll address Jacob directly. So we talk about quality, parity, and history. Quality, we will hit first. Quality being just how good are the teams relative to all other teams. So North Carolina and Duke are, you might call them the college basketball royalty. So they're third and fourth all time. I was actually stalling because I needed this number. They're third and fourth all time as far as victories, total victories in college basketball.
UCLA number one?
Actually, it goes Kentucky, then Kansas.
Oh.
Anyway,
NCAA
over the last 40
wins.
years, they've each won 5 national championships, which is a pretty crazy number. They've been to the Final Four over 10 times each in the last 40 years, the Elite Eight even more, and so on. They've been conference champions multiple times. So I think you guys are going to be hard-pressed to debate quality with me as far as these two teams. It's pretty well accepted that they are two of the greatest in the sport. As far as parity goes, so how equal are they against each other and overall? So I already cited that in the last 40 years, they've both won 5 national championships. So that speaks to quality and parity. This stat always blows my mind. It's insane. And so I have all these numbers going back 40 years. For the last 40 years, they'd played each other 96 times, and both teams had won 48 games while both scoring the exact same amount of points, 7,437. Like, that stat blows my mind. They played 96 games, and they split not only the record, but the point total. It gets truly no more equal as far as rivalries go, head-to-head, than these two. And as far as history, so Duke and North Carolina have been playing each other since 1920. I mean, plenty of time to make an intense rivalry. So now to Jacob's point about, North Carolina just hates Duke as much as anybody else does. Here's why that's not true. North Carolina and Duke are 10 miles apart from each other. 10 miles. It's called Tobacco Road, the road that separates them. And so they're among the closest major colleges in the country. And I don't know this for sure, but they've got to be the closest or top 2 or 3 as far as rivals go. So, yeah, Duke is hateable, but for North Carolina, it's even more personal because this is a battle for territory. This is we're getting down to instinctive, this is territorial battle, okay? They're 10 miles apart. Who owns the land? On top of that, there's cultural issues between them that add to it. So Duke is a kind of preppy, well-respected academically private school, and North Carolina is a big public school. Most students at North Carolina are from in-state. Most students from Duke are from out of state. And so there are definitely reasons why the animosity would increase from, North Carolina to Duke versus me to Duke. I'll stop there.
That was a beautiful monologue, Jared, and I stopped paying attention after you said maybe they were the second or third best rivalry, so that's great.
Thank you, Jared, for the background. Jacob, how about you give us some rivalry background from the Ryder Cup teams?
Sure. I'd be so happy to. The Ryder Cup rivalry will turn 90 years old this year. And I know that's not as old as maybe Michigan, Ohio, or UNC Duke can maybe boast, but it still covers generations. What is, I think, extremely important about how this rivalry relates to this argument is that this one is international. And if you want to talk about cultural differences and how that goes down on the playing field, you got to take it international to see how it really goes down. The Ryder Cup happens every 2 years, and it is the most riveting and patriotic display in sports. I mean, I like it more than the Olympics. I won't say it's more patriotic than the Olympics, but the fans, the players, the captains, the officiators, everyone involved gets so riled up about this competition, it absolutely defies tradition and convention of regular golf. People are going crazy after tee shots. They are screaming after chips that go up to 10 feet, nothing special at the British Open, but people are going to go wild, painting their faces, waving flags. Caddies are celebrating crazier than you've ever seen them before. This competition has the spirit, at least, especially comparatively to its regulation sport, but I think even just compared objectively to these sports, this rivalry is linked to the greatest competitive spirit, at least in this argument. I'd also like to say that if you want to talk about greatness, let me just list a few names. Jack Nicklaus, Arnold Palmer.
Oh, baby.
Tiger Woods. Nick Faldo. Seve Ballesteros. Sam Snead. Name a great golfer in history, and they've played on this team. Why limit yourself to a rivalry that is only pulling from students from a college? Why not pick a rivalry that's pulling from the greatest players in 2 continents? the quality of the competition that we have seen at the Ryder Cup is insane. Partly because there's so much more on the line than there is for, I'll attack Joe here, for LeBron versus Michael Jordan. And it's that they're playing for their country. And literally, I think it goes so far as to say for the possession of their sport. And that's where it gets territorial, but even to a greater degree than what Jared said. These guys are fighting over who can claim ownership over the sport, basically. That's where it gets territorial. It's this competition moves every other competition takes place in the opposing location. So it alternates USA, Europe. So it is fully exposed to the brutal fans screaming and yelling. It actually became a problem at this last Ryder Cup. That's where you can see the animosity. But on maybe a more supplementary note, the Ryder Cup has become so prominent as a rivalry that it's basically the only respected team format to play golf with teams more than two. It's a genius way to play that further matches up head-to-head matches. It's smaller rivalries accumulating to this huge rivalry. And the formats change where you can see one pair of Americans going up against a pair of Europeans. And you see a team dynamic build between two people, and it becomes really personal. And that goes up against maybe, for instance, two Spaniards that are really connected to the death of Seve Ballesteros. And you can see the history of this rivalry. It's also the kind of rivalry that has matchups so historic that they pick up these kind of notable historic names like 1991, the War by the Shore, the Ryder Cup on Kiowa Island Resort, or the Battle of Brookline in 1999, or more recently 2012, the Meltdown or Miracle at Medina, depending on what side you're on. Everything that everyone has brought up is true about what makes a rivalry great, but the Ryder Cup has everything that we've all mentioned, but to just a wildly greater degree. So if we want to get literal and serious about the greatest rivalry of all time, it's got to be the Ryder Cup.
Joe, I'll let you defend that little jab Jacob took at you. Why don't you give us some more reasons why your rivalry is the best and some history around it?
What was his jab? That the Ryder Cup carries more weight? I will get to that.
That was it.
Okay, I'll get to that when I rebut Jacob's whole argument later. But if you want to know a little history about Michael Jordan versus LeBron James, I can also grant you that. Because the beauty in this is that it's not only a debate between two people, it's a debate between two schools of thought. And you go between a lot of different statistics when you're comparing two players from two different generations. But here's some statistics for you. In terms of NBA championships, Michael Jordan has won 6 and LeBron James has won 3. And LeBron James is probably only a few years away from the end of his career, which means that these stats are kind of coming to a close, and they're very close in many of them. And LeBron James isn't going to get too many more championships because there's a team out west called the Golden State Warriors, and thanks to people like Steph Curry and Kevin Durant, he probably won't win any more championships. But he'll probably be stuck at 3, maybe 4 championships versus 6. This is a common debate between people on how much weight a championship matters in terms of the greatest of all time. In terms of other things, they played 14 seasons for LeBron versus 15 seasons for Michael Jordan. They've each played in similar amounts of playoff and all-star games. They've been season MVP 4 times for LeBron, 5 times for Michael Jordan. In terms of finals MVP, LeBron James has been an MVP 3 times and Michael Jordan 6 times. Another point of contention on how much finals MVP matters, or whether just the MVP in general matters more. Points per game, LeBron James is 27, Michael Jordan is 30. Total points, 28,000 for LeBron, 32,000 for Michael Jordan. It's statistics like these where you're basically comparing two people across a variety of metrics, and different people have opinions on what those metrics mean. So it's more than just a rivalry between Michael Jordan and LeBron James. It's a rivalry between the ideas of what makes the greatest basketball player of all time. And that's what makes it exciting, and that's what makes it divisive.
Stop using that word.
Divisive.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, Chris, it is your chance. Convince me.
I'll combine my history with my quick rebuttals. I have very brief rebuttals to everybody. Jacob, I love the Ryder Cup. I've been to the Ryder Cup. It's one of my favorite events in sports. But my only knock against it, I think it's up there, is that it's biannual. There's a lot of time in between, whereas a lot of these other rivalries, they're playing much more frequently, which allows for more exposure to that rivalry. Joe, just because something is quote-unquote divisive doesn't mean it's a rivalry. It's more of a debate than a rivalry. So, like, where do you draw the line? What if I said, what's a more American sport, football or baseball? A lot of people in the country are going to have an opinion on that. It may be quote-unquote divisive. Does that mean it's a rivalry? Gee, I don't know. It seems more like a debate to me. Last but not least, Jared, I'm more piggybacking off of Jared's points than I am rebutting them. I think it's no coincidence that even though it's a small sample size, half of our debate submissions are university-based. And that's because you get tradition and history at universities, and you also get the purest form of sport in which players are playing to win and playing for a school and a community, as opposed to when you become professional, a lot of players are playing to support families, to make money, playing to, support a lifestyle outside of that. And that's never been more apparent than now, when it's so rare to see a pro stay with one team for an entire career. That being said, let me tell you why Ohio State versus Michigan is the best all-time rivalry. It's a lot of what Jared's already said, so I'll try not to be redundant. But if you opened up a Wikipedia on the history, it's so vast that it would take a whole nother podcast just around the rivalry to touch everything. But they've been playing football since 1897. Yes, I said 18, not 19. I mean, they've had a ton of star power come through because it's some of the athletic, as far as college sports, those two schools are near the top in so many different athletics, not just football, not just basketball. But for example, Michigan has 8 Hall of Famers in the NFL. Ohio State has 10. It's America's most popular sport in football, but again, it extends beyond football. There's so much bad blood. There's continual pranks and fights and arguments, and you see some of the more aggressive people show up on YouTube doing something stupid and going to jail. And last but not least, there is not only does there have to be history, but there has to be a certain timelessness. And what I mean by that is that despite teams' success or, the ebbs and flows of win rates at certain schools, that those matchups always mean something. So here's just a little brief stat line of how these games always matter. So from 1970 to 1975, Michigan was undefeated going into every single game against Ohio State in football. And for reference, that is usually the last game before the college football bowl season starts. So Michigan's undefeated in every single one of those games. They lost every single one of those games, and Ohio State had losing record in half of them. Vice versa, Ohio State was undefeated in 93, 95, 96, and Ohio State lost each of those games to a subpar Michigan team. This rivalry has been around since the 1800s. It's got all the pure competitive aspects and tradition and history that the university athletics provide. And despite how these teams are performing, generally they're both at the top of all of college sports. But even despite that, that game can be so important and so emotional that the subpar team can come out ahead of what at sometimes can be the best team in the country.
Great. Would anybody like to cut down somebody else?
I'd say that the fact that the Ryder Cup happens every 2 years does more to, I think it gives the cup more emphasis and just gives that rivalry more time to kind of fester. I don't know. I don't want to sound like too subjective, but to me, it feels perfect that 2 years comes around and it's a holiday, basically. And the pros feel it, the fans feel it. It's time for the Ryder Cup. And especially with college basketball, it's just so, it happens so fast and so frequently that I feel like you might lose track of a game. I think with football, it's not that way, but it's just a bit more special when it happens every 2 years.
Joe, do you have a response to Chris's argument that yours is a debate, not a rivalry?
Yeah, I do. Look,
He does not.
No, I do. The thing is that rivalry and debate is not two exclusive terms, all right? The definition of a rival for you is one of two or more striving to reach or obtain something that only one can possess. And I can't think of a better example of that than two people striving to be the greatest of all time. And in terms of rivalries with these college teams, like they may go, 1 year one team's better, the next year the other team's better, but striving to be the greatest of all time is kind of a next level thing to strive for. And in terms of debating, you can have rivalries and debates. I mean, some of the greatest theologian debaters of all time, they were huge rivals. And for instance, my boy Jared over here, we debate all the time, and I would consider him my rival mostly because I hate him. But it's things like that, rivalries.
What are you both trying to achieve?
To be better.
Enlightenment.
Yeah.
But Joe, the difference between you and me is there's no parity. I think I win every debate.
Okay. Let's go back.
And also, there's no quality.
I don't deny it.
We need to go back to last episode when we gave the rundown on who's won the most debates.
Yeah.
I mean, but also the difference is that you and Jared or those theologians are directly facing off against each other on the same platform. It's not like Michael Jordan and LeBron James are saying, they're each at a podium throwing stats at each other, trying to figure out who the best player of all time is.
You might call Chris a theologian the way he's preaching at you, Joe. What are you going to say to
he's
that?
Preaching. I wouldn't say that these two are free from animosity or throwing things at each other, so to say. LeBron James once had a quote where he was like, I'm the greatest basketball player there is, or something along those lines, to which Michael Jordan put out a clip where he basically was saying, oh, look at all these rings. The best teams were the 1991 Bulls, 1992 Bulls, 1993 Bulls. He's like, you're saying there's someone else? Who, And you also get these teammates of the players, such as Scottie Pippen, Allen Iverson, all these people who are quite vocal in giving their opinions on why Michael Jordan, there's no comparison between him and LeBron James. So not only is it just the players that kind of have a little bit of animosity, it might not be huge, but also just their teammates who have probably much more than they do. And in response to your points about how college is so storied and great, I would argue that gets overplayed. And I think college sports especially are more of just a blind allegiance to your team. I enrolled at the University of Tulsa. I paid them whatever sum of money, and now for the rest of my life, I'm going to root for them. And I think that people outside of the University of Ohio State University and University of Michigan are just like, who cares? It's great to watch them if they're both a good team, but otherwise there's no stake there. And the beauty of this argument with LeBron and Michael is that I can go down the street in Oklahoma City, New York, Los Angeles, and if I find a sports-minded person and I ask them the question, they'll have an opinion one way or the other.
I don't know. I think the exclusivity of a rivalry group could be a benefit, not a con, It's cool that there's certain people that care about it and certain that don't. Also, you didn't pay Tulsa any money. They paid you to go to school and $2,000 for lunch every semester. So don't pretend like you paid anything.
You're not wrong. And now my allegiance is to them for that reason instead of because I paid them. I am in debt to them. I would actually, while I'm on this little podium here, I would like to throw some points at this Ryder Cup thing that Jacob keeps talking about. The way you described it to me basically makes it sound like you're arguing that the greatest rivalry of all time is the NBA All-Star Game or the NFL All-Star, where it's just a bunch of good players come together, they work together, and they play against each other, and honestly, no one cares. The All-Star Games are some of
okay, have you ever
the least cared about things in sports. I mean, people watch them because it's cool to see all these players, but they don't actually care which side wins, West or East. And another thing is that this is an individual sport, and the greatest rivalry in it is when they come together and play a team sport. I think that's kind of a strange way to have the best rivalry in your sport. And finally, your point about the fans being super rambunctious, I think that more exemplifies how rowdy Americans can get drunk and start throwing things. It's not like the fans really cared that much who won.
Yeah, okay. Show me an instance of one person crying from the emotional overload of the NBA All-Star Game.
I don't know that who's crying during the Ryder Cup.
Show me one person who said the NBA All-Star Game was more important than them winning an actual championship.
Who said that?
Bubba Watson said assistant captaining the last Ryder Cup team was more important than any major victory he had had.
Bubba Watson also eats Taco Bell burritos before the Champions Dinner at the Masters. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that. That's true. I would allow that to be we can throw out that that evidence just based on the fact that Bubba Watson serves funfetti at the Masters Champions Dinner every year.
Hey, Judge Man, can I get in on this?
Yeah, Jared. One thing I want you to address is why your rivalry is better than Chris's, because they're very similar.
Yes. Yeah, I was about to get into that. So I'm going to skip out on the LeBron MJ rivalry. I think Chris has done a good enough job dismantling that one. I'll add a couple more things to Ryder Cup, and then I'll point out why mine's better than Chris's. So at the beginning, when I laid down my framework for determining, the best rivalry, Jacob was quick to say he agreed. Chris was quick to say he agreed with some add-ins. And that was quality, parity, history. History includes emotional history, which gets into hatred, animosity, that kind of thing. It's golf. Like, it's a staple of the game to be gentlemen and to keep the hatred and animosity contained, and you're not going to find the kind of emotion. Even you make a good point that the Ryder Cup is more emotional than a regular golf tournament, and that's fine. Having people jumping up and down at the golf tournament, the Ryder Cup, still probably pales in comparison to the Cameron Crazies, the Duke student section is their name. They're called the Cameron Crazies, jumping up and down, going absolutely insane. Probably pales in comparison to Ohio State or Michigan fans at their games. And so, as far as that part, it's lacking. Parity is the kind of the big thorn in the side for Ryder Cup, I think. Historically, the United States they've won 64% of the matchups, which is a pretty low. That's not very equal, especially compared to Duke, North Carolina, where North Carolina has a 50, I'll have to double check, 54 or 55 win percentage. So we're talking 10% difference. So 64 is it's not that equal. Europe's won 7 of the last. Say again?
I said, damn straight it's not.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
But on top of that, whoever's winning wins in big streaks. So Europe has won 7 of the last 9. The U.S. won a ton of the first 30. I didn't count that. So parity isn't really there. Okay, now on to Ohio State and Michigan. You're right, Big D. They are very similar, and so we have to go back to the framework we've established and that we've kind of agreed on. Quality, parity, history.
Who agreed on this?
Let's start with quality because it's on top. Over the past 40 years, just to keep the timelines consistent, I've already said UNC and Duke have both won 5 national championships each. It's a crazy number. Ohio State has won 3. Well, I'll double check that, but they've won, I think 3, and Michigan has for sure won 1. The quality is just less. North Carolina and Duke are the best more often than Ohio State and Michigan are in their respective sports. This is a side point. I understand that rivalries ebb and flow and that kind of thing. Ohio State has won 5 in a row. So as of recently, the rivalry has been pretty lopsided. And then my other point, as far as history goes, is they play once a year. So Jacob was making a point about how it's very special that Ryder Cup is once every 2 years. It's true. It makes each game or match more special the further apart they are. But when you sum up the 2 or 3 games that North Carolina and Duke play a year, the specialness sum is greater than the 1 game Ohio State and Michigan play a year. And it gives it more chance for history to form. So that's kind of those are my points on why mine's better than Chris's. And if I can add one thing to support my argument as far as history and animosity goes, you think of some of the epic fights in North Carolina Duke history back in the early 2000s when both were amazing, as is often the case. There's a player named Tyler Hansbrough on North Carolina's team who that year he won, was it the Naismith Award for Best Player? I think. He was amazing, unreal. And he was going up for a layup or a dunk, and a Duke player, I wish I could pull up the video, like, jumped up in the air, and I'm sure he said he was going for the ball, but, like, he just punched him in the face. He punched him in the face. The ball's up above Tyler Hansborough's head, and somehow this guy's fist hits his nose. Tyler, his nose is busted bloody, right? And they go on and play. The animosity exists among the fans, but also clearly among the players who have gotten in their fair share of scrums.
I'd like to throw in a really quick point that I know I can't change my answer, but if I could, I think I'd change it to the rivalry between Jared's lungs on which one could pump out more air for that long-winded speech you just gave.
I like to use my time.
Thank you, Dr. Joe. Okay, I think I'll use that as your closing remarks. Jared, you covered your points pretty well as some counter arguments to other people's rivalries. I'll give Chris, Jacob, and Joe 30 seconds, no more. You can either spend the time boosting up your own rivalry or tearing down the other choices. Up to you. Let's start with Chris.
Thank you, Judge. Michigan and Ohio State. Greatest rivalry of all time. It's not just one sport. That's the big thing against Jared. Besides that, it's got all the great tradition and history that universities bring. Just like what Jared was talking about, you can Google Michigan-Ohio State fight and find a whole plethora of clips. And last but not least, the parity is there. It doesn't have to be perfect. As long, Michigan's won 58 games, Ohio State's won 48. It's close enough that it makes this rivalry a school versus school, very intense, and plenty of games that become some of the most important games in the country year in, year out.
All right. Joe.
Chris and Jared both gave really great arguments on these rivalries, but the fact is that they both are arguing for things that only a very select few number of people care about. And the other thing is that these teams often go on runs where one's considerably better than the other, such as Michigan only just kind of became a contender again, and North Carolina just became a contender again. And for a long time, there's just runs where one team is considerably better than the other, and that's not really a rivalry. And Jacobs is just a big old-fashioned all-star game. But the beauty of LeBron versus Michael Jordan is that these are two players that basically have two different schools of thought behind them, and a much larger base for argument and for division. And that's what makes them the greatest rivalry of all time, and I think it'll stay that way for a while.
Jacob.
A huge part about the Ryder Cup is the greatness. You've had Jack Nicklaus, Arnold Palmer, Sam Snead, Tiger Woods, Nick Faldo, Seve Ballesteros, absolute kings of this sport have played in this rivalry, and it's more so than could be said of any of the rivalries brought forward so far. You've also got the scope. It covers 2 continents. You've got a huge amount of investment just from the patriotism alone in these players. That contributes to the most definable characteristic of the Ryder Cup rivalry, and that's the spirit. It's so palpable that it actually visually and emotionally changes the way the entire sport is played. And these guys who are writing it off as an all-star game or are writing it off as golf being too quiet are pretending they have not seen this rivalry played out in practice. This is the greatest, widest, best, most wonderful rivalry that's ever been in sports, and just talking about it has got me excited for the next one.
Did you say widest?
Yeah, I heard widest. Why'd you have to bring race into it?
Widest. It's okay. I don't know if you heard me say it covers 2 continents.
Yeah, I heard you say white. As
Whitest.
in W-H-I-T.
With the exception of Tiger Woods, the whitest tournament.
All right, Jared, to be fair, I'll give you 15 seconds if you want to say anything.
Thanks. I'll be quick. I'll be 15 seconds. I've made all my points actually. You know where I stand. The three words ending in Y and North Carolina Duke is the best in all of them.
Wow. I'm impressed with all of your arguments. This will not be an easy decision. Whew. Okay. Very good points, very good counter arguments. As of now, I am not decided on who won, so I'll let you know that much. But you cannot convince me. I took lots of notes. Chris is disgusted at Joe's pick. That was one of his counter arguments. LeBron wears Jordan's number, lol.
Just because he wants to show how much better he is.
Bubba says the Ryder Cup is most important to him. But the all-star aspect of it, those were some good counter arguments.
Oh my gosh.
Ryder Cup sucks.
Joe mentioned that the college sport rivalries are restricted to small populations, which the Ryder Cup and LeBron MJ arguments are not. So those were also good counter arguments. Overall, one person gave creative responses that I did not think that they would be able to come up with and took a lot of heat, and that person is Joe. Joe, you're the winner.
Yes! The GOAT argument.
And the reason I picked Joe is he really was creative and defining in Rivalry in a different way than all three of the rest of you were. It wasn't just...
It was creative. It just lacked effectiveness.
Yeah.
Just lacked correctness.
Yeah.
You and Jared argued the same
thing. It's not
thing.
just a debate. It is a rivalry, and it spans different careers, but it's still a rivalry because it's LeBron and MJ going for the greatest of all time, which I think is a rivalry, even if it's a little more subjective than two athletes competing right now against each other. So, Joe, congratulations. You did a good job with...
Thank you. Thank you very much. Golf clapping.
I congratulate you, Joe.
That was not an easy decision, and good job to you all.
That's Joe.
That's the easiest one to lose to, actually, because it's so bogus.
Yeah, Joe, I have to say that, like, it's not even close. Yours is the most wrong.
Chris and Jared, yours were like exactly the same. I really cannot choose between you.
Quality. 5 championships each.
Jacob, I honestly think the all-star comparisons, I know it's like a bigger deal than most all-star games, but at the same time, like, is it really that important? Probably not, even though Bubba thinks so.
It's so important.
It really is.
Well,
I mean, like, I wanted to, but could not find just examples of all of the quotes of great athletes saying how important it was to play for the Olympics, because it means more to play for
That's what you should have argued
your
for.
country than it does. I couldn't find the evidence. Like, there's literally, I don't know. I'll feel bad if y'all find those quotes way easier, but, like, of course I wanted to argue that more strongly.
I mean, you should have argued for the Olympics, not for the Ryder Cup.
Yeah, but who's America's rival?
What's the rivalry in the Olympics?
I mean, there's been a lot of different
time.
rivalries. You can find them. There were a few I was looking at.
It's an honor to make this case and just to talk about the Ryder Cup on the podcast. I had a lot of fun.
And it was an honor to judge this debate.
Oh, thank you, David.
All right. Thank you for listening, everybody. We will be back in 2 weeks. Every other Friday is the schedule. Thank you, Chris, for Skyping in all the way from New York.
Thank you for having me once again.
Say it, Chris. Where's your accent?
New York.
Boo.
Very nice.
I'm glad that's not what we were judging.
Thank you, Joe, Jared, Jacob, for being here.
Of course.
That is it. We will see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 So long.
Thanks for listening to Hostel Discourse. Subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. And check out our other social media accounts linked in the show notes. Join us next time for more inexhaustible debate over the most questionable of topics.